Alright guys, we're back with the kicking clinic, okay? As you see, it's a little chillier out here than the last video. I got my beanie on and all that. But nonetheless, we're still kicking because that's what we do. Alright, so today, what we're going to do, we're going to kind of get into the meat and potatoes of it, so we got to move pretty fast. You've heard me talk about this differential diagnosis and how we figure out what's going wrong with our kick, and then of course how we fix it. Today we're going to start doing that. We're going to get into this world of differential diagnosis, how we figure out what is exactly going wrong. Remember, we got what is the symptom of the problem and then what is the actual problem. And we're going to use our 5 elements to kind of systematically work through this and figure out what I did wrong, which one of the 5 elements I did wrong, and was that an actual problem? Is that what I messed up, or is that really just a symptom of something else that I messed up? So today we're going to start talking about the plant foot, okay? And talk about kind of what your body feels like when the plant foot goes wrong, and then just kind of some other things. We'll just kind of talk and just rock and roll, okay? So if you remember the plant foot, we have 2 components of it, a width and a depth, okay? So we have to get the width right and of course the depth right. So let me move the camera around and kind of talk about. I got my little T thing set up here. You see I got a net. We're going to do a little kicking here in a second. Let me do this. I hope y'all can see it through my net. Yeah. Put that behind the camera. That's not going to work. Alright. Let's just do this. Alright. Make sure y'all can see that. There like that. Okay. So we got a width and a depth component, right? So imagine this is where my ball is going to be. Go ahead and set my ball up here. So that's where my ball is going to be. Now I have a width component, all right? That's narrow, that's wide. So what are we looking at? What happens when you're a little narrow? Oh my goodness, I'm breaking my equipment here. What happens when we go narrow, okay? So, we'll show you in slow motion. So what happens when you go narrow? So this is me, I'm narrow. Remember, we got plant foot, and then our next component is our kicking position. So if I'm narrow, basically I'm jammed in there, I'm too close to the ball. That's the first sign that you're gonna know that something's wrong. You're going to feel jammed in there. In fact, sometimes I refer to it as, hey, you jammed in your plant foot, because you just feel like you're on top of the ball. You feel like I can't get in here, I don't have enough room to kick. So that's the first feeling that you feel. Hey, I'm too daggum, I just feel like I don't have room. Then you got to look at the plant foot. It's probably too narrow. And the other thing that happens as we come in too narrow, we can't keep our kicking position, right? Our kicking position, knees over our toes, shoulders over our knees, right? If I'm too narrow, what I end up having to do, subconsciously, I have to straighten that left knee, trying to create room, because remember, we're jammed in here, right? So subconsciously, I straighten that left knee, trying to create room, all right? And what happens, look at my hip right here. Watch what happens to my kicking position. So yeah, I'm jammed in, but I have a pretty good kicking position right here. As I try to create room, watch what happens to my kicking position, my left hip in my kicking position. You see how that hip pokes out? Just like that, okay? So that's kind of one of the other second big red flags, is you'll feel that you might feel that hip kind of poking out, all right? That's trying to create more space. And so look at this kicking position. That's no good. I can't do anything. I got my shoulder down. My follow through is not going to happen at all. All right. So if my plant foot goes wrong, one of the symptoms that I'll have is a bad kicking position. Right. So as I'm going through this differential diagnosis, like, how was my kicking position? Well, my kicking position was garbage. Well, is that the problem, or is that a symptom of the problem? And then as I worked through it, I realized, oh, well, my plant foot was too narrow, so therefore my kicking position got messed up because of my plant foot. So my kicking position is not the problem. It's not that my hip is weak or something like that. It's just that my plant foot was in such a bad position, I had no choice but to poke that hip out and get in a bad kicking position. Okay? So as we do that, obviously bad kicking position, okay? And if we have a bad kicking position, this position right here, there's no way we can follow through either. So that position, there's no way I can follow through up toward my left shoulder. It's going to end up coming around like that. All right, so remember, good kicking position, I come through, follow through up toward my left shoulder, right? Boom, up toward my left shoulder. With this, I'm here like this, my left hip kicks out, I'm too narrow, my left hip kicks out, there's no way I can follow through like that. It ends up looking like that. Okay, so if you get a follow through that's kind of diving off to the left, it could be a problem with your follow through, and we'll get into that a little bit more. But start at your plant foot. Was it my follow through the problem? Was I just lazy with my follow through and it fell off to the left? Or was it something else? And if you backtrack, you say, oh, my follow through is lazy, it's falling off to the left. Well, was it an issue of effort and I wasn't maximizing my acceleration? Or, well, my kicking position was terrible. So was it that? Was it my hip and my kicking position? No, bottom line, it comes down to the plant foot. You see how we kind of work backwards from it? I hope this is making sense. I'm moving pretty fast. All right, and the same thing kind of goes, so those are kind of your big cues for what your body feels like when you're too narrow. You're going to feel jammed in there. You might feel that hip poke out, and then you'll probably feel that follow through kind of diving off to the left, low, instead of being up toward that left shoulder, what I call low and toward that left hip there. Okay, those are kind of the big three cues to know if my plant foot's too narrow. Now, what happens if my plant foot's too wide? Kind of the complete opposite, okay? If I feel like I'm jammed in here, I'm gonna feel like I'm reaching. I'll feel like I'm reaching. I feel like kind of my shoulders end up being behind my hips, and I feel like I'm reaching for the ball, okay? The ball will actually come off if you're wide, it'll come off kind of low. And then of course, if you're narrow, I didn't talk about this, if you're narrow, you'll find that the ball kind of comes off your ankle. Because remember, you're jammed in there, you don't have enough room to hit the sweet spot, so you jam in there and it kind of comes off your ankle. Now if you're wide, complete opposite. I'm reaching for the ball, so a lot of times it tends to fall off way low, kind of on that joint between your toe and your foot. It hurts. Just going to warn you, especially on a cold day, kind of like today. And then you're reaching. Again, your kicking position looks kind of bad. So if I'm reaching for the ball, you'll feel like your shoulders are kind of behind like this. And you're reaching, okay? So same thing, I'm wide here, I'm reaching for the ball, coming off kind of low on my foot, feel like my shoulders are behind me, and then again my follow through, you get what I call the helicopter effect. You may still kind of have a high follow through, but you end up spinning around kind of like that. You can't move forward with it. Okay, remember, a good kicking position, you kick and then move forward, right? You kick and move forward. But when your plant foot is wide, we can't do that because everything's kind of back and reaching. So as we come in here and try to hit the ball, we end up kind of helicoptering around. The follow through may be high, but you end up helicoptering around it a little bit. Okay, so that's narrow and wide, and kind of what your body feels like when you do those. Now what the ball does, let's talk about that a little bit before we move on. So if I'm jammed in here, and I'm narrow in my plant foot. Remember, we're jammed in here. Can't lock my foot out, down and out, because I don't have room. Kind of rolls off my ankle. If you notice, what ends up happening, even me standing here, I have to do it. My hips, in my kicking position, my hips are blocked out to the right. So a lot of times when I'm narrow like this, I'm going to block out, and the ball's going to drift wide right on me. It's probably going to have a real fast backspin, because I don't have leg lock. I'm kind of scooping, kind of like, almost like a wedge style, right? I'm jammed in here. Don't have enough room. I can't bring my hips around because I don't have enough room to get in there. So I block it out, boing, and it just blocks out to the, kind of off to the right. Real fast. It might even kind of lean away from you. Kind of like that. Whoa. I don't know if you can see it. So when it blocks off to the right, kind of like that, real fast, fading spin off to the right. That's what the ball looks like when you're narrow. Now when you're wide, again, you kind of, because you're reaching, you have a tendency to want to pull the ball. Now we'll talk about this a little bit more when we get to the follow through and stuff, but a typical rule of thumb is wherever your follow through goes, that's kind of where your ball goes. And so if I'm wide, and remember we have that helicopter follow through, and follow through going way off to the left, that's where your ball's going to want to go. It's going to have kind of a hard hook to it. Okay? So remember, when we kick, everything's like we're supposed to, that ball goes dead daggum straight. We're not supposed to have a hook in our ball. So if you got a hook in your ball, you need to reevaluate some things, okay? A hook is something's wrong, okay? We're supposed to kick it dead straight. So if I come in here and I'm wide, I'm reaching for the ball, I kind of hit it off the end of my foot, right? And then I have this helicopter follow through. I can come around, but chances are it's going to want to hook at the end. You may make it, that'd be perfectly fine. It's, truth be told, probably a little bit easier to control a wide follow through, a wide plant foot than a narrow plant foot, but it's probably going to dive off to the left, so, okay? You may even miss it left. Now, I'll be honest with you, occasionally I've seen one with a wide plant foot that squirts off to the right, okay? What ends up happening here is you're so far away, you just can't get enough foot on it to even pull the ball in line, so the ball actually kind of rolls over the top of your foot and flips off to the right. That's kind of the minority. The majority of the time you end up kind of grabbing it and hooking it off to the left. But just keep in mind that there is a possibility that it squirts off to the right, okay? So when in your evaluation process, so say I missed it wide right, what am I going to look at? Basically, I'm going to kind of look at the plant foot first and say, well, was my plant foot good? If my plant foot's bad, a lot of things are going to get messed up. We've kind of already talked about it. If my plant foot goes wrong, it's hard for me to keep a good kicking position. If it's hard for me to keep a good kicking position, it's hard for me to have a good follow through. All right? And it's hard for me, if I got bad plant foot, it's hard for me to make good foot to ball contact. Okay? So plant foot's a really big one. That's kind of one of the reasons I start with it. Because if that gets messed up, a lot of things kind of snowball into it, okay? So just kind of real quick recap on what the ball does. If I'm narrow, I'm jammed in here, my hip kind of pokes out, I get wedged in there, I can't get good foot to ball contact, the ball squirts off to the right real fast, ugly backspin, all right? Now if I'm wide, we have kind of the opposite. I feel like I'm reaching for the ball, I feel like I can't reach it, and it comes off kind of low on my foot near my toe, right? And then I have this kind of helicopter-y follow through, come spinning around myself, and the ball has a tendency to want to hook left. Okay, every once in a while it will dive off right, but majority of the time it hooks left. Okay, so that's the narrow and wide. Let's talk real briefly about depth. Okay, turn it like that, and I hope you can see it. Let me double check, make sure we can see everything. I'm gonna back up so you can see. All right, so now we're talking about depth, okay? Remember, depending on the tee that you're kicking off of, I'm kicking off the ground, so I'm pretty deep, okay? I'm about the top of my arch right there. That's where I'm supposed to be, all right? So what happens if you're too deep? Let's talk about that, too deep. All right, so I'm too deep. Too deep is very similar to being too narrow, okay? So you're gonna get kind of the same, you're gonna get similar, I just blanked on the word I'm looking for. You're going to have similar sensations. That's the word I'm looking for. Similar sensations. So if I'm too deep, I'm going to have a tendency to feel like I'm kind of on top of the ball, kind of jammed over it. Okay? A lot of times it's going to be hard for you to get that down and out because I'm on top of the ball. You're going to almost come in wanting to wedge it a little bit. You may even take a divot. You take a little sand wedge. So if you're taking a big divot right in front of the ball, there's a pretty good chance that you're probably a little too deep, okay? So we're gonna get that same sensation of being a little bit too narrow, very similar to it. I feel like I'm on top of the ball. I don't have room to get my down and out. I may even take a divot into the ground, hurts my toe, you know, because it hits the ground. And I'll hit the ball usually pretty high on my foot, kind of near my ankle. And again, the ball will kind of have a tendency, you have a tendency to want to push the ball. So if I'm too deep, I have trouble getting my hips around because I don't have enough room to rotate my hips. So I end up kind of blocking out and the ball drifts off to the right, okay? Now, if we're too too shallow, it's kind of like being too wide. You get a lot of the same sensations there too. So I'm too shallow. I really feel like I'm reaching for the ball. I might feel it come off my toe. you know, real low on the ball like that. You may even kind of end up, you know, standing up or reaching. Shoulders end up back behind your hips in your kicking position because you're reaching for the ball. And again, you're going to have a tendency to want to pull this kick, okay? It's very similar to being too wide. You're going to have a tendency to want to pull it because we're all back here. My fall through again gets that kind of helicopter-y look, right? That little helicopter-y look. And I end up having that diving hook at the end. Sorry about that, camera fell. All right, sorry. All right, so like I was saying, too shallow, reaching for the ball, bad kicking position, shoulders behind my hips, fall through is a little helicopter, and my foot to ball contact comes off real low on my foot. All right, so I have a tendency to want to hook the ball. All right, again, sometimes you can square it off to the right, but the majority of the time you're going to end up pulling it. Okay, so with all that being said, I want to kick just a couple. I got a net here. We're not going to look at the long balls because, like I said before, I only got 2 balls. So let me kick just a couple. And to be honest with you, I'm going to try to mess up, which is actually not that hard for me. But I'm going to try to mess up here. This video is getting kind of long, I know. But I'm going to kick just a couple kicks. I'm going to try to do some narrow and wide. I want you to watch the first couple. I'm going to try to go real narrow. Watch what happens to my hip and my kicking position. So as I kick, I'm going to do a narrow plant foot here. So my plant foot's going to be kind of narrow, right there like that. I want you to see how my body has to react. And watch my follow through, especially watch my hip here, the kicking position. Try one more. It's actually pretty hard to mess up on purpose. Again, we're going narrow here, okay? Watch my hip and kicking position. All right. So I hope you noticed each one of those balls came off my ankle. This is what I was feeling. I hit each one of those balls right off my ankle right there. Okay? I tried really hard to get my follow through around. That's why I actually got those to go semi-straight. They were kind of low and semi-straight, but that's just because I was working really hard with my follow through. But this is what I felt. I felt like that, jammed in there, came off my ankle, and so I really had to work on my follow through to try to keep it in line. It just was ugly, okay? So now, let's do the opposite. Let's try to go wide here and see what that looks like. That really hurt, by the way. Came off my toe. All right, one more going wide plant foot. Ow! I say ow because it hit my toe. It came right off my big toe. Ow. Gonna give me a bunion if I keep kicking like that. All right, that's not good. Not a good, oh, that hurt. Okay, so both times I hope y'all paid attention to the way my kicking position was. See how it's hard to do that? I've kicked for a long time, so I was able to kind of have somewhat of a half decent fall through, but really it wasn't good. But bottom line is I had terrible foot to ball contact, hurt like the dickens. So now let's watch it from the side. We'll go with the too deep. We'll go two kicks are going to be too deep, and then 2 kicks are going to be too shallow. All right, remember we're too deep, okay? So remember everything I just said. Too deep. Watch watch where, look to see if I take a divot or not. Okay, that's the key here. I don't know if you can see it, but there's a little bit right there. All right, one more, going too deep. Ow, that was it. All right, I hope y'all saw that big tuft of grass fly up. That really hurt. Okay, I hit it right there, my toe took a divot. The ball came off way up here. I hope y'all saw I couldn't have a good high fall through. I just kind of had to power through it real quick. It was really ugly. Okay. All right, let's go to too narrow. Excuse me, I'm sorry, too shallow. All right, too shallow here. All right, one more. Notice that one. The too shallow, I'm able to keep a better form. I can get a pretty good follow through. I can even really truly hold my plant foot, hold my kicking position a little bit better. You might see me crunch real hard, trying to get my shoulders over my plant foot in my kicking position. Or excuse me, my shoulders over my knees in my kicking position. But bottom line, that ball comes off way low on my foot. My foot is hurting pretty good right now, to be honest with you. All right, let's do it again. Real narrow, real shallow. Ow. Okay. So you see, I wasn't able to have a good smooth kick. Let me kick one right. Let me kick one ball right, and then you can kind of compare. Alright, that's a pretty big difference between those first few kicks and then that last one, okay? You saw how much higher my fall through was, how I was able to finish forward in that last kick, okay? Alright, so I hope all that makes sense. It's a lot of information. Bottom line is when you're kicking, kind of keep your little spidey sense going and feeling where the ball's coming off your foot. Kind of, is it high or low? Do I feel like I don't have space? Do I have space? Is my hip poking out? Stuff like that. Okay, those are all different elements. You know, hip poking out, that's part of the kicking position. But we use those different elements to work our way back down to the problem, which was today talking about the plant foot. Okay. Now next time we'll go moving on, talking about more the kicking position. Okay, just because the kicking position gets messed up doesn't necessarily mean that the plant foot's always going to be messed up. Sometimes you just have a bad kicking position. We'll talk more about that each time. Okay, but I hope all that makes sense. A lot of information, but just keep kicking. If you've got any questions, you can post them or email me, one of the two. And just keep kicking, keep working. See you next time.